should seek forgiveness of the person you backbit. And if you are not able to do that, and there's situations where you can't do that, not because they're dead, that's a reason, right? Not because they moved to another continent, that's another reason. I don't have their number, I don't, whatever the case might be. But simply because if you do, it will cause animosity and hostility, right? Brotherhood in Islam is such that we should avoid doing things and speaking to people in such a way that we cause animosity between ourselves, right? This is the Prophet ﷺ said, and I mentioned this earlier, the Prophet ﷺ said, it is enough of an evil deed to look down or have rancor towards another Muslim, right? And so any time that we cause this in another Muslim to dislike us or to have these feelings towards us or towards another Muslim, right? This is actually, you're initiating sin. You're initiating sin. And what I'll say about this is that if, for example, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, Ameen, Abdullah said, Fulan, so-and-so, right? Fulan, he was here earlier and he was talking trash about all of y'all, right? And now we all like Fulan, I don't like Fulan, I'm mad at Fulan, right? And now I'm mad at him, right? Any sin that I have towards so-and-so, Abdullah, ways that you carry that, right? Because you initiated the sin from me. And so we have to understand that our words carry weight. And so when we when we plant seeds in the heart of other people, we bear the fruit of that, good or bad. Good or bad. If two people have animosity towards one another, this is another point. And unfortunately on social media, we deal with these people who are ignorant, right? And I'm talking about non-Muslims. And so the first thing, they try to poison the well. And they'll say, Taqiyyah, right? You heard Taqiyyah? You know Taqiyyah? Mm-hmm. You do or you don't?
I don't know.
Okay, no problem. Omar, what's Taqiyyah? I'm just playing with you, man. I'm just playing. You know what it is, though? No, okay, so Taqiyyah, again, it's poisoning the well. We'll just use it in English. They say, Muslims are allowed to lie, right? Muslims are allowed to lie. And so they take it out of context, of course, and they say, well, since you're allowed to lie, you can just lie. And that's it. So how can I believe anything you're saying, right? So therefore, no matter what comes out of your mouth, they don't have to believe, trust, or anything. You could lay all of the evidence at their feet, and they'd be like, but you're allowed to lie, so I can't believe you, right? And so it eliminates all room to have a civil discussion, a reasonable discussion, because that's why it's called poisoning the well, right? So, alhamdulillah, but there's a basis for it.
Yeah, what if you President Rasul did that? Remember?
Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So there's a basis for it, right? Alhamdulillah. So I think that we talked about this not that long ago, but under a different context. So Ammar ibn Yasir, he was a young boy. His mother Sumayya, she was the first martyr in Islam. And then her husband Yasir was the second martyr in Islam. It was Abu Jahl, I believe, but it could have been Abu Lahab, right? I forget which one of them it was. But they came to her and she declared her faith, and they took a spear and they killed her without giving any details, right? Her husband came out, same thing, they killed him. Ammar, they said, are you on what they're upon? And he denied, he rejected faith. He rejected faith. Why? Because they were going to kill him, just like they killed his parents, right? And so he became ashamed of this, and he stayed away from Dar al-Arkam, he stayed away from the gathering place of the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ noticed him missing after a couple of days, and he asked about him. And he sent for him, and when he came, he said, what happened? Where have you been? And he told him what happened. And he said, I said foul things about Allah and His Messenger ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, what is in your heart? And he said, nothing but love for Allah and His Messenger. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, if they come back again, then say the same thing again. Right? Say the same thing again. And so what this means is that if you fear for your life, literally fear for your life, not, oh, I'm afraid they're going to make fun of me because I'm a Muslim, or I'm afraid I won't get this job because I'm a Muslim, or I'm afraid they won't give me a visa because I'm a Muslim, or whatever the case might be. Nah, if they're going to kill you, life and limb, dorora. Yani dorora is not haja. I know I'm throwing out terms here. What I mean is, haja is a need. Dorora is life and limb, right? So if it's life and limb, you are permitted to lie. You're permitted to lie. This is not the only time we're allowed to lie. It's not the only time we're allowed to lie, right?
That's the one I know about.
Huh?
So that's the only time I know about.
So you get very school.
6 years.
I'm telling you that. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First and foremost, let me say, the companions asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the kaba'ir, about the major sins, those sins that are dire and you do them not thinking it's too big of a deal, but you end up in the fire of hell over it. And so one of them is shirk. The second one is disrespect and disobedience to your parents. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, bearing false witness, and he was reclining. He was leaning over, reclining when he said this. And he sat up and he said, bearing false witness. Lying is from the kaba'ir. Lying is, and it's worse when you give testimony, but lying is from the major sins. But the Prophet ﷺ gave us exceptions, right? So one exception is in actual combat, war, right? War is deception. This isn't an Islamic concept. This is a reality that everyone, if you read The Art of War by Sanza, it says in there, war is deception. This is not something unique to the Prophet ﷺ. Though, this is a reality. So, one of the practices that the Prophet ﷺ himself had is that when they were marching to the north, he would always leave to the south. Right? If they were going to the south, they would leave to the north. That way the enemy wouldn't know that they were coming. Right? And then they would circle back. This is a type of deception. Right? War is deception. For us, it's that simple. Another reason, again, to save a life, we covered that. Whether it's yours or somebody else's. I'm getting to a point. There's a reason I brought all this up. Right? The third reason is if you're between spouses, and what this means, and let's just be frank, right? If I said to my wife, am I still as nice looking as I was when we got married? And she's like, oh, of course you are. Like, no, I'm not. Right? No, I'm not. But for her to say no, right? That might offend me. That might upset me, right? I had to flip it back on myself. But if a woman asks her husband, because we always do it this way, but if a woman asks her husband, do I look fat in this? And the husband's like, no, of course not, right? Yeah, it does make her look fat, but I ain't brave enough to tell her, right? That's the thing, is that those types of lies, they save arguments, right? They save arguments. And you're not sinning when you do things like that. That's not considered a sin, right? But the reason that I brought all this up is for the fourth reason. And the fourth reason is when someone reconciles between two people. Right, when someone reconciles between two people. So Omar and Abdullah, you guys are arguing, right? And Alushalai goes to Omar and he says, Abdullah said he's sorry, but he doesn't want to be the first one to say it, right? And then he goes to Abdullah and says, Omar said he's sorry, but he don't want to be the first one to say it. And then you guys just meet and let it go because you think that both of y'all are sorry and nobody wants to say it. And you're like, nah, he don't have to say it as long as that's how he feels, whatever the case. And so that line, to reconcile, to bring people together, that's a reason that permits lying. I went through all of this to say that when we are in a gathering and there's backbiting or there's tail carrying or something like this, sometimes you can't do the correct thing and contact that person and say, hey, I backbit you, or I told them something that you don't like. I told them about that time that, right? because that will cause division between you and another Muslim. Just like it's so, unity in the Muslim Ummah is so important that you're permitted to lie to reunify people, right? So what about planting seeds that divide people? And so if you can't go to the person and say, I backbit you, will you please forgive me, right? If you are afraid, and I went on a long tangent, but we're coming back, inshallah. If you are afraid that if you do that, that will sever relations and cause animosity between you and another Muslim, then the fact of the matter is that you shouldn't do that. So then what do? Right? In that case, you make dua for them. You give sadaqah on their behalf, right? You literally pray for them. You should pray, oh Allah, please forgive whatever wrong they did. Have mercy upon them for what I did to them. Oh Allah, the weight of my sin against them, please give them good. And don't take it from me. I just want to add that part of it. But the point is that you supplicate for them, but you should also do good, right? On behalf of them, so that when you meet them on the Day of Judgment and they take their right from you, because it is their right, that you paid that in this life before you see them in the hereafter, right? And so there's this wisdom. And so